Taking a look at news from around the QMJHL, we talked about Chicoutimi getting to play a game. Unfortunately for them, it did not last long as the city of Chicoutimi has now entered a red zone, so they are not going to be able to play any games, at least for the time being. However, the QMJHL is working with public health in Quebec regarding a 7-team round-robin tournament for teams that are located in red zones in Quebec. Each team would play 6 games over a 14-day period from November 10th to November 22nd, as the government of Quebec is going to be reassessing activity in red zones on November 23rd. The estimated cost of such an event would be in the 6 figures. The tournament is proposed to take place in Quebec City, which is in the red zone. Shawinigan has also offered to host said tournament. They are another red zone team. Discussions are ongoing, according to Horatio Arruda, who is the National Director of Public Health. Now, of note, not that he would have any influence on the decision, but Gatineau Olympique head coach Louis Robitaille said another thing you may see in the Q this season is inter-division games between Quebec-based teams, because the East and West divisions weren't supposed to play each other this year, but that could be an alternative to make up games when you have teams from both of those cities not in red zones. So we'll see how that plays out. Louis Robitaille's old team, the Victoriaville Tigre, players on that team were actually able to go home for a week because the training camp was getting a bit weary, I guess, because they were not playing any games. There was optional training for those that stayed in the Victoriaville region. Another note about COVID-19, Drummondville assistant coach Matthew Turcotte has left the team due to COVID-19 reasons. He has concerns over the virus. It was his 6th season as an assistant to the QMJHL, his 2nd with Drummondville. Story a lot of people are following is what is going on in the OHL, as they're aiming for a February 4th start date, and there's a dispute as to whether or not there would be body checking, as earlier this year we heard from Public Health in Ontario saying that they wanted there to not be body checking if the OHL were to restart. However, Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, has come out and said he would like to see body checking in the OHL. A few things to note here: the GOJHL, which is a high-profile Junior B league, Junior B being more developmental in Ontario, they are scheduled to start on December 1st with no checking. They'll have body contact, but no body checking, so a compromise there. So that could lay the path for the OHL to do the same. And at the second intermission, we're actually going to hear from Josh Brown, who's a reporter in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, and we're going to talk about the OHL's restart plan, and of course, the no body checking is a big part of that. Another story we're watching around the CHL is a number of high-profile players that are opting to play Junior A while they wait for the OHL and the WHL to return. A couple of names you probably know here: Ozzie Weisblatt of the Prince Albert Raiders and Jake Neighbors of the Edmonton Oil Kings, both going to play Junior A with the Brooks Bandits. Both of those players were picked in the first round of the NHL draft this year, so interesting to see those guys try to do that to stay in shape. Big news out of Halifax earlier this week, if you missed it. Zach Jones is back with the Mooseheads. The American had not been able to get over the border. However, he attends St. Mary's University, and they are now allowing international students, so he is able to cross the border as a SMU student. Last year, he had 34 points in 63 games. In his first year in the Q as an 18-year-old, he's eligible to play on November 20th when Halifax hosts Bathurst, because, of course, he has to do his quarantine. Speaking of Americans in the Q, our next item is loosely related to that, as the Sherbrooke Phoenix have called up a pair of players, including 20-year-old forward Charles Tremblay, who had a eye-popping 105 points in 42 games in Junior AAA last year in Quebec. Now, mind you, that is a very high-scoring league. He has 4 assists in 27 games in the Q. Now, the reason I'm connecting this to the USA is because Gregory Kreitzer, expected to be a big part of Sherbrooke this year, the American defenseman, has not been able to get to Sherbrooke, so that leaves an open slot, at least for the time being, but obviously Sherbrooke would like to have him in the lineup, and they hope to before the season ends. Phoenix have also called up 16-year-old Carl-Etienne Michel, who was drafted in round 3 this year, was going to play his midget in Magog and may still, but for the time being, he's been called up to the Q. The Q awarding its Players of the Month for October. Forward Xavier Simoneau of the Drummondville Voltigeurs is the Forward of the Month. He had 10 points in 4 games. The honorable mention is Thomas Casey of the Charlottetown Islanders, who had 17 points in 9 games. And of course, when giving these accolades, the people at Q offices have to work on a bit of a scale here because the Quebec teams haven't played as much, and hopefully that will be resolved in the coming days. The defenseman of the month is Lucas Cormier of the Charlottetown Islanders. The 18-year-old had 13 points in 9 outings. Honorable mention, Jared Baker of the Cape Breton Eagles, who had 14 points in 10 games, so a great month for him. The rookie of the month is 18-year-old forward Vincent Labelle of the Moncton Wildcats, 10 points in 7 games for him. The honorable mention is Marcus Vidicek of the Halifax Mooseheads. He had 8 points in 6 games. Goaltender of the month is Charlottetown's Colton Ellis. Had a record of 6-0, goals against of 2, and a save percentage of .919 with a shutout. Honorable mention is 19-year-old Jonathan Lemieux of the Val d'Or Foreur. Had a record of 3-0-2, goals against of .193 with a save percentage of .924. Couple of reschedulings to tell you about. Baie-Comeau and Rimouski are playing this weekend. They played last weekend as well. Those two games that'll happen tonight and tomorrow are actually reschedulings from games that were supposed to take place on the 16th and the 17th. I mentioned earlier that Moncton played this Wednesday in a game that had been rescheduled, easy for me to say, and the other rescheduled game that they need will be taking place on December 2nd when they host the Charlottetown Islanders. That was originally supposed to be a game on October 18th. A couple of suspensions to tell you about in the QMJHL, including one of note for tonight's game. 20-year-old Matthew Desgagnés, the Acadie Bathurst T10, will miss both games this weekend for a 2-game suspension for boarding. He's off to a great start this year, 17 points in 10 games, so the T10 will miss him this weekend. 17-year-old forward Israel Mianscum of the Sherbrooke Phoenix also out for 2 games for a check to the head. He had 16 points in 52 games last year after being picked in the first round by the Phoenix. One last note for you, and congratulations going out to Eagles forward Connor Trenholm as the QMJHL naming its Student of the Month honors for its 18 teams, and Connor Trenholm snags the honor for the Eagles, so congratulations to Connor. That's another installment of Trucking Around the Q. You're listening to the pregame show on McDonald Auto Hub, Cape Breton Eagles Hockey, 1270 CJCB.